Something happened in the Americas in the early 19th century that should make no sense. Two colonial empires collapse at roughly the same time. Two sets of colonies win independence from European powers. Both start with similar territory, similar populations, similar problems. One shatters into 18 separate countries. The other becomes the largest nation in the Southern Hemisphere. Same continent, same era, completely opposite outcomes. Spanish America fragments. Brazilian doesn't. And the gap between those two paths shapes every border, every conflict, and every power struggle in Latin America right up to today. So why? What was different? The answer is not the obvious one. It is not geography. It is not culture. It is not even military force. The answer is about the moment each empire fell apart and who was in the room when it happened. Start with the Spanish side. Spain's empire in the Americas is enormous. It stretches from California to Patagonia. It has been running for 3 centuries. And it is built around a very specific structure. Viceroyalties, regional capitals, strong local governors answering to a crown that is thousands of miles away. Those regions develop their own identities over time. Mexico is not the same as Peru. Peru is not the same as Venezuela. The Andes separate them. The Amazon separates them. The distances between Buenos Aires and Bogota are not just physical. They are psychological. Each region develops its own economy, its own elite, its own sense of itself. And then Napoleon happens. When French forces occupy Spain and remove the Spanish crown in 1808, the Spanish colonies face a constitutional crisis that nobody is prepared for. Their loyalty was to the king. The king is gone. Now what? Different regions answer this question differently. And that is where the fragmentation begins. In the north, a man named Simón Bolívar is building a liberation movement. He is brilliant, driven, personally courageous. He crosses the Andes in winter. He wins battles that should be impossible to win. He liberates Venezuela, then Colombia, then Ecuador, then Peru, then Bolivia. Notice what is happening. He is liberating regions, not a continent. Every territory Bolívar wins is a separate campaign, a separate political negotiation, a separate set of local elites who supported his cause and now expect political control of the territory he fought through. When the fighting stops, the borders follow the logic of the campaigns. In the south, San Martín does the same thing from the other direction. Argentina, Chile, Peru. Each one a separate liberation. Each one a separate country the moment independence is secured. Bolívar understands the problem. He tries to create a single, unified Spanish-American state. He calls it Gran Colombia. He imagines a federation that could hold the liberated territory together. It lasts about 10 years. Then it collapses because the regional identities are already too strong. The local elites who fought the wars want their own governments, not a distant unified authority that looks uncomfortably like the empire they just overthrew. Gran Colombia splits into Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador. The Central American Federation splits into 5 countries. The Plata region splits into Argentina, Uruguay, Bolivia, and Paraguay. By the middle of the 19th century, Spanish South America is already 18 separate nations, and the borders between them will produce wars, disputes, and power struggles for the next 200 years. Now look north, at Brazil. Brazil is different from the moment the crisis begins. Not because of geography, not because of culture. Because when Napoleon invades Portugal in 1807, the Portuguese crown makes a decision that no other European monarchy ever makes. They leave, not into European exile, not into surrender. The entire royal court, the king, the government, the treasury, the archives, load onto ships and cross the Atlantic, 15,000 people, the whole apparatus of a functioning state, relocating to the colony. The King of Portugal arrives in Rio de Janeiro in 1808 and immediately starts doing what kings do. Building institutions, opening ports to foreign trade, creating a bank, establishing courts, founding a university, printing the first newspaper Brazil has ever had. For over a decade, Rio de Janeiro is the capital of the Portuguese Empire. This single fact changes everything that follows. When the Spanish colonies are tearing themselves apart, figuring out who gets to govern what, Brazil is not a colony anymore. It is an imperial capital. It has a functioning central government, a bureaucracy, a military with a national, rather than regional identity, courts that operate across the entire territory, roads connecting the coast to the interior, a state that thinks in continental terms. The infrastructure of unity is already built before independence becomes a question. Napoleon falls. The king returns to Portugal in 1821. His son Pedro stays behind as regent. And when Portugal's parliament tries to reduce Brazil back to colonial status, tries to strip the institutions the court has spent 13 years building, Pedro refuses. He does not negotiate. He does not compromise. He declares independence, not for a region, for all of Brazil. The entire colonial administration, intact with its networks and its courts and its army, simply changes its allegiance from the Portuguese crown to the new Brazilian crown. There is no war. Think about what that means. Spanish-American independence is won through years of brutal guerrilla fighting and conventional warfare. The wars that free Spanish America kill enormous numbers of people, devastate local economies, and leave regional military commanders as the most powerful figures in each territory. Brazil transitions without a military conflict. The institutions survive intact. The borders do not need to follow the logic of who won which battle. They follow the logic of the colonial administration that was already there. The giant is born whole because the mold was already whole. But then comes the real test. Because being born as one country is not the same thing as staying one country. The 19th century presses hard on Brazil. The empire inherits the worst legacy of the colonial period, slavery. By the time Brazil abolishes it in 1888, it is the last country in the Western world to do so. It has received more enslaved Africans than any other country in the Americas. The economic and social tensions this creates run deep. The coffee economy shifts power south. São Paulo grows rich while the Northeast declines. Regional inequality becomes severe. There are revolts. There are separatist movements. The Northeast, the former sugar heartland that once made Portugal wealthy, watches the South pull ahead and wonders why it should remain attached. And yet, it stays. Why? The language. Portuguese. Every country in Spanish South America speaks Spanish, which means every breakaway region can still communicate with every neighbor. Linguistic identity does not bind Spanish-American region together because the language does not belong to any single one of them. Brazil speaks Portuguese. Only Brazil speaks Portuguese in South America. To break away is to become an island, the only Portuguese-speaking territory in a continent of Spanish speakers. The linguistic isolation makes separation economically irrational in a way that has no equivalent in the Spanish colonies. Then there is the bureaucracy the royal court built. Courts, ministries, a national army that was never organized as a collection of regional forces in the way that Spanish-American armies were. The skeleton of the state was continental from the beginning. And there is something harder to measure: the culture. 3 centuries of mixing European settlers, African enslaved people, and indigenous populations produced a Brazilian identity that was never purely regional. The Northeast is Brazilian. The South is Brazilian. The Amazon is Brazilian. These are not just political claims. They are cultural realities that emerge from the mixing itself. The monarchy falls in 1889. A republic takes its place. Military governments come and go. Economic crises hit hard enough to destroy weaker political systems. Hyperinflation so severe in the 20th century that prices change faster than they can be printed on labels. None of it breaks the country. And that contrast with Spanish America becomes more visible with every passing decade. While Brazil is working through its crises as a single unit, Spanish South America is fighting wars between countries that were once the same colonial territory. The War of the Pacific, the Chaco War, the border conflicts that run through the 19th and 20th centuries. Countries that share language, religion, and colonial history fighting each other over the borders drawn by which general liberated which territory. The cost of fragmentation is measured in wars that should never have been fought. Brazil has its own wars. The Paraguayan War is devastating. But it fights them as one country, not as a participant in a continental civil war between fragments of a broken empire. Today, the difference is stark. Brazil is the largest economy in Latin America, the 5th largest country on Earth by land area, a continental power that can project influence across the entire region in a way that no Spanish-American country can match. It still has enormous problems. Inequality that tracks the fault lines of slavery, deforestation eating the Amazon faster than anyone knows how to stop, political instability that surfaces every generation, but it is still one country. One language, one government, one continental project. The Spanish crown built an empire and then lost it all at once, and the pieces fell separately because they had no single center to fall toward. The Portuguese crown did something stranger. It fled. It ran to its colony. And by running, it left behind the one thing that made all the difference. Not gold, not soldiers, not laws. It left behind a capital. And a capital has gravity. Once a center exists, once people build their careers and their fortunes and their institutions around a single point, separation becomes the hard choice and unity becomes the easy one. Napoleon invaded Portugal and accidentally guaranteed Brazil. History rarely announces when it is turning. It just turns. And sometimes the thing that saves a country is the thing that was supposed to destroy it.